Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Nature of Work podcast. Since the dawn of time, humans have engaged in what we call work. In the modern world, there are thousands of professions: a plumber, city planner, artist, project manager, fashion designer, firefighters, and thousands more. In this podcast, we want to explore the nature of work through the eyes and ears of such practitioners. What got them into it? What is interesting about it? How do they keep up as well as advance? Why is it important as to what they do? How their careers have evolved? And any interesting tidbits on their workplace? We hope it is useful in whatever career stage you are. Today, we welcome Jayashree Krishnan. Jayashree Krishnan is an artist in the Seattle area, and she has been a full-time artist since 2015. And if you are going to a Sunday market, if you're going to the Columbia Art Gallery, you can see her work. She is exhibited widely in the Seattle area. Jayashree, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
You're welcome. So let's get started. So you started as a professional artist about 12 years ago. But before that, there must have been a lot of prep, a lot of inspiration to get into that. Could you talk to us about your early days of how you got started in the whole art, not business per se, but the whole art experience?
Sure. The art experience necessarily is not new for me. I think it's always been there ever since I have memory of anything. I have memory of making art, even as early as 3, 4 years old. I was making something. So I've always been making something. But to tell the world that this is what I do and I'm an artist, and to own that in a sense where I was comfortable with, that took some time.
I see. Was there anybody who inspired you, like a relative, a friend, a teacher that came by and inspired you to start painting or doing some doodling?
I think it was more about not inspiration per se, but encouragement, or this effect the art had on people. I would draw my teachers in class when, instead of paying attention, I would doodle, and that made my friends take interest in my work, and they would say, "Can you draw me?" That kind of thing. So I knew that the art was interesting for people to look at, and that kind of encouragement really kept me going. I was like, okay, can I make this better to elicit a bigger response from people?
Oh, wonderful.
Um,
Wonderful, wonderful. So I'm going to zoom right from there to 2020. We had talked about this before. One of your big projects that you worked on for quite some time was this project during the pandemic. Can you please tell us what was all that about? What inspired you, and what is the outcome of all of that effort?
yes, that's a great question, and I look back at that time with the mixed emotions, because art-wise, in terms of a body of work, that's probably the biggest one I have done to date. Close to 200 paintings that were all portraits of healthcare workers. And in that same time, I also painted some other commissions and things. So that year was very productive in terms of how much I painted. But how this whole thing started was really like almost an accident. We were all in lockdown, and I painted a quick sketch of my cousin who just volunteered to work in the COVID unit in her hospital in Detroit. And I posted that on Facebook to tell her, hey, good job. We recognize your efforts. You're being super brave by going out there and tackling this unknown thing. And this was March 2020. We'd just gone into lockdown. Nobody knew what COVID was about, and we're all very scared. And the amount of response that post had in terms of how people, her patients, her friends, her family members, people in her network, all suddenly came out to say, "Oh, great job." It was not about the painting. It was more about reaching out to her saying, "You got this. This is great. What you're doing." Um, that response kept me going. I kept doing more. I did a whole set for a local hospital here called Virginia Mason, and the response again each time was other people coming in. It was like opening a door for people to come and say something encouraging to those people, to those medical workers at the front lines. And I knew that art had a power to change, to make some change in a positive way. Um, and social media too.
So it turned quite quickly from painting your cousin to something more phenomenal, where a lot of people got involved and they were sending their portraits to you. Of course, you couldn't travel during the pandemic. How did you manage to capture a high fidelity portrait of people just from their picture?
Right. That was a very interesting phenomenon because if someone sits in front of me and I can make their portrait, I can see so many nuances in their faces and, I can do a better job. But during the COVID times, what I was getting was selfies. And that too, they were taking it in full, a PPE. They had multiple masks, or their eyes were not properly visible for me. I couldn't see the color of their iris sometimes as I was making these portraits. But I tried to do the best I could in terms of trying to capture the likeness with the very little face that was visible in the pictures that they sent me. And many of these people were strangers, many I've never
Right.
met.
And you said you had painted over 150 portraits. Now, did you see yourself, your technique evolve while these portraits were being made? Like, did you become, you know, doing 150 paintings is no easy job, but did you see your technique evolve over this project?
Oh, definitely. I changed from just making a pencil, like a pen and ink sketch on paper to a higher quality, it's called a aqua board, which is a special board that's coated with clay that I could use watercolors on. What would take me about a week to do uh, through the course of the year, as I was painting more and more, I was getting close to like 165, 175 portraits. At that time, I was painting 3 portraits a day, each one lasting maybe about 2 hours each. I brought it down to that's what happens when you keep doing it. You just know how efficient you can be and how quickly you can do it. And the speed was important because the volume of requests that were coming at me was growing, and I had to keep up my pace.
And then you got inspired to do actually turn this into a book. Now, tell us a little bit about that project, because, like, artists paint, but to turn this into a book and that be available for people to purchase is another big project by itself. What was involved in that?
Interestingly, when I began, it was a couple of people that I knew. As the project itself was starting to grow, all of these people, like a whole slew of nurses from Jefferson Hospital in Philadelphia, each of these people would write to me on Facebook Messenger, Instagram DM, or send me a text message and tell me what they were going through at that time. And I was collecting without really putting too much effort into that part. It was organically happening. They would tell me what was happening at that instant in the COVID pandemic time, how it was affecting them, their families, and their patients. And I would write all of this down. And I had, over the course of the year, collected so many stories that it felt like it was as important as the portraits themselves for people to know that here, this is telling the story of the pandemic. Because I was getting these stories all the way from April 2020 till February 2021. So that in itself was telling a very important story that I thought needed to be put into a book form so people
Hmm.
could actually hold in their hands, see the portraits that went along with it, and read about it. Because these portraits that I made, they were gifts to these people. So I would finish a portrait, I would frame it, and then I would mail it out to these people. And for them, it was a stranger sending them something in by mail that they would open, and they would connect with that particular time in their lives and feel that they were seen and that their stories were heard. So that book
Yeah,
became a very important piece.
wonderful. I think it will stand as a testament to those trying times. That's a wonderful production from your part. I want to
Thank
get a
you.
little bit into um, getting inside the mind of an artist. Even I'm an engineer myself, so I know how engineers think. But what is in the mind of an artist? How do you see the world? Do you see yourself thinking differently from other people? Like, do you see the world in colors? Give us a little bit of insight into what makes up the mind of an artist.
That's a great question. I think for any visual artist that likes to do representational work, something that they can see and paint, it becomes a way of seeing the world differently. Not in terms of, I mean, everybody sees beauty. If you see sunset, everyone is in awe. But when you say to yourself, okay, I need to bring that same sense of awe onto a piece of canvas or some substrate, that translation of what you see and how it turns into a piece of art, that that process in between requires a certain way of seeing. And you need to translate the colors, the light, the value that you see into something that's tangible, and something that is as close as possible to the beauty that nature offers. So
Uh-huh.
that process takes some time, but it's a way of learning how to see in layers, how to see it in color, and how to see it in the right value, and learn to reproduce and get your technique to match up what your eye is seeing.
Right. So when you want to paint a subject or a landscape, do you pretty much spend the time in front of it, or do you use tools like take pictures and iterate over it, trying to understand the process of converting from what you see to what ultimately happens on the canvas?
Another good question. Of course, the ideal thing would be to sit in front of the subject that you're trying to paint, or be in front of the scene that you're painting. But it's not always possible to do that, especially in the Pacific Northwest. When I take a backpack, go on a hike, and set up my easel and start to paint, it suddenly starts to rain, or a cloud comes in and my palette is changing. So then I do have to take a picture, come back to the studio, and then turn that 2D image from on my phone into something on canvas. So the process is different. Either way is great, but then, painting from life is always better.
Yes, absolutely. And when you mention, going out on a hike and trying to paint there, one of the things that you had shown me is your travel journals. And so you're in the habit of doing travel journals. How does
Yes.
that work? Because, travel could be, there is a lot of scheduling involved. How do you find the time to paint while you're traveling? And how do you manage the time with other people who might be traveling with you, who might want to do other stuff rather than sit in one place and paint?
Uh, Good. That's an interesting thing. But here's what I would say. If when you think about travel, there's so many parts of travel where you're just waiting. It's waiting at the gate for your flight to arrive. It is waiting to get onto a ship. It's you're waiting for a ferry to come. While you're on the ferry, maybe again you have 2 hours of just looking out the window. There's so much of downtime in travel that could be turned into something that you can remember for the rest of your lives. So just packing a small set of watercolors, even just a pen and a book, to write down thoughts, to make a quick sketch, it's always good, to throw in the suitcase, because what comes out of those sessions when I'm making quick sketches or writing or finding about the history of the place that we're at, I find that I remember those times way more than if I say look at a picture I took at the beach or something.
Uh-huh.
Um, if I spend 3 hours sitting in front of, say, a historic building and painting it, in those 3 hours, I've met people, I've heard sounds, I've smelt the, different um, smells in that place. There's so many little details that come to my memory when I look at the finished product, even years
And I'm
later.
sure somebody comes up to walks up to you and starts chatting about your painting, right?
Yes, yes, they do. In Peru, this guy came up to me and said, "Oh, your painting, look at my painting." And then he opened up his backpack to show me a very colorful picture that he had made. And he said that he was under the influence of ayahuasca when he painted it, and he offered to sell some ayahuasca to me. So all kinds of interesting things can happen.
Okay, got it. Oh, interesting experiences there. Um, what is your focus these days? Do you have a theme going on, or are you painting whatever comes to your mind? Tell us something about, what appeals to you these days.
Yes. Over the last 15 years or so, I've tried various different types of mediums. And in each one, I've tried to get to a point where I feel like I have proficiency in that particular medium. And having 3 or 4 different ways of using paint has given me now an opportunity to be able to paint anything I see to a reasonably satisfying level. So now it became an important thing in the recent year or so to really think about what it is I want to paint and what is my art. What would I really like to say with my art? Um, because everybody talks about finding your own voice when it comes to making recognizable artwork.
Mhm.
So to me, it has become more about how efficiently can I use my energies to paint something that is long lasting? That's not just a fad. That's not just, oh, I'll do this for a few months and then I switch to another subject. I want to do something that keeps the viewers engaged in when they see my artwork, something that draws them in and keeps them there for some time.
Mhm.
I want to put some meaning into the artwork that is not so easily visible in the first pass. Um, I want to use some art as a way of conveying something that's deeper, something that's timeless.
Uh-huh.
So, as esoteric as that sounds, I want to pursue that.
So something that conveys like a philosophy, maybe?
So there's just various different concepts, and I felt about a few years ago that I was extremely enamored by how poetry can be turned into something visual.
Hmm.
There's in Sanskrit poetry, there's something called as Chitra Kavyam. Kavyam is poem, poetry, and Chitra
Mhm.
Kavyam is specifically meant to bring a visual to each poem. So there is inbuilt imagery in a very specific manner, intentional manner that the poet has envisioned as something that can be made into a painting. So that is very fascinating to me. That it's not something that you find in any Western poetry. It is a very very much a Sanskrit poetry feature to have a Chitra Kavyam. I found that to be very interesting, and then I've kind of done some research in that area and made a few paintings, and I find that might be where I'll spend my time.
Got you. Anything interesting in that? Any poems that you've been able to paint so far?
Yes, there is one composition called Paduka Sahasram that has a whole chapter where every one of the 32 poems is meant to be a painting. One of them was really fascinating to me because it was in the area where there was some mathematics, some literature, some spirituality, some game playing. There's just so many different disciplines that seem to be coming together in one poem. And that poem it's called Chaturanga Turanga Bandham, which translates.
Chaturanga Turanga Bandham. Chaturanga
Yes,
is like
Chaturanga.
four.
Chaturanga is chess.
Oh, Chaturanga is chess.
Chaturanga is chess. Turaga is a horse, and Bandham is a solution. And it turns out that it is a chess problem that has been around for a few hundred years. But this is a problem also called as a knight's tour. It is a movement, a sequence of moves that a knight can make on a chessboard, so that it lands on every square one time. So you start at one point, but then you move like the knight would move in the L-shaped, sequence. And then the goal is that you cover the entire board with this sequence.
So it will touch every square.
Yes, it lands on every square. If you think of the knight as a white horse, it's just landing on every square just one time. It's easier said than done. If you try it, you'll know that it's not that easy to do that without going back to the same square. So if you come up with a sequence of these moves to find the solution, is not so easy. Although there are thousands of solutions to this problem. The beauty of this is that the Chaturanga Turanga Bandham was written all the way in the 13th century, And then, of course, all the way back then, they played chess. They knew that this problem existed. And the solution was so beautifully and so almost unassumingly put in a pair of poems. So there are two poems. They're anagrammatic. They have each 32 syllables. And if one set of the 32 goes onto the chessboard twice to cover the 64 squares, the next poem, which is an anagram, tells you how to move the chess, the piece, the knight, in such a way that as you follow the second poem, you're solving the knight's tour.
So it seems like you have to convey motion, technique, like the actual movement of a knight on a chessboard. How did you capture the motion aspect of it in the painting?
Yes. First of all, I was envisioning this entire knight to be a white horse. And I somehow wanted a large white horse on the painting. I wanted the chessboard with all of the letters written in each square, like the poet would have envisioned, also within the same painting. So I started with figuring out where the horizon line would be, and then drew the chessboard in perspective. And then once I had the chessboard done, then I needed to paint a giant horse. So I ended up going to this place in Redmond, which is not too far from where we live, to find a white horse.
Okay.
I found
a white horse.
I found a horse rescue stable where there was a white horse named George, They allowed me to spend some time there, videotaping George moving, jumping, um, and I use that as reference to finally pull it all together.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. So like an actual field trip to capture a real live horse and translate that into your framework for the painting. That's fascinating indeed, Jayashree.
Thank you. All of these paintings, I feel like the concept for the whole thing to come along is hundreds and hundreds of study sketches and time to really figure out what composition will work the best to tell the story that the painting needs to be telling. So all of that background work really helps to finally pick up the brush and say, okay, I can tackle this.
Got it. So, the first aspect of starting a painting is, I think, choosing a subject or choosing a subject. So once you choose a subject, how do you then move on to, hey, what medium should I paint this on? Is there any suitability of certain subjects with certain mediums? Do you try to slice and fit, or do you just like decide organically, hey, this is what is going to work, and you just go for it?
Mm. Sometimes the subject itself lends itself best to a certain medium. I feel like the subject kind of determines which medium is best to use so that you can do justice to it. For instance, if someone said, paint my baby's portrait for me, I would find that a watercolor would be the best medium to do that, because there's something very gentle about a watercolor, where as you layer, you can bring um, the luminosity that's in a child's skin, um, and the brightness in their eyes, and the lines are a little softer. Um, so I would choose that versus, say, a pen and ink, which
Mm.
has very, very sharp lines.
Hmm.
Um, if it's a portrait of a person that can sit in front of me for hours and hours, then oil paint is great because it's forgiving. In the sense that if there's a mistake I make, I can always go and fix things
Uh-huh.
as I'm working. Um, yes, everything depends on how much time and the nature of the subject and what's available.
Got you. So last year, uh, you and another artist collaborated and created a mural to, and that mural is right next to the Columbia Art Gallery. Tell us a little about that mural and what was the inspiration for the project, and what was the outcome?
The idea itself was conceptualized by a friend of mine who was also a gallery co-op artist. She was part of the artist at the gallery that I was working at. And she had applied for a grant in Columbia City to paint a bus. And this is a bus that she was riding for years. And even now, route number 7 is still going in the same route for almost 100 years now. So it was like a historical project to commemorate this route number 7.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And she had the idea to paint a large bus, but she didn't know how to go about it. So she asked if I would join her in her efforts to paint the mural. I was very excited because I like to paint things large. And I said, okay, I'll join if I can contribute something interesting to this project. I like to paint portraits. How about we paint portraits of people from Seattle's history who have ridden this bus before? And that there began the project, and it turned out to be a really very, very interesting few months that we spent
Mm-hmm.
together to bring it to fruition. And 25-foot mural that's 10 feet high that shows about 12 people from Seattle's history.
Huh.
Turned out to be a very interesting project. I loved it.
So where can people go look at it? Is it
So
something
it's
that is
on, yes, it's on Rainier Avenue South, and it's right next to the alley by the Columbia City Gallery.
okay, wonderful, wonderful.
Mhm.
Finally, Jayashree, you've been at this for a while. What would you tell, what tidbits of advice would you give for somebody who is interested in art and starting out?
The biggest thing I would say is don't quit.
Huh,
Never quit. No
okay.
matter what you take, just don't give it up. Because it's easy to be harsh on yourself and say, I'm not good enough, or open yourself to critique where everybody becomes a critic when you show your work. But then you know how much work went into it, and you know that there's always room for improvement. There's never a point where you can say, I've reached my best. There's always room for you to grow. So don't quit. Keep going, and don't listen to any negative voices either in your head or from someone else that tells you that you can't.
I think that is very actionable advice. Jayashree, thanks a lot for coming onto this podcast and sharing your insights on how art is done. We wish you the very best in your future endeavors and hope we can catch up, in the next 6 months or so to see if you have any new exciting projects that are in the wings. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on your podcast. This was very exciting.
Thanks to you for tuning in. We always like to hear feedback from you. You can tweet to us at Carabiner Media 1. That is CARABINERMEDIA and the number 1. You can also send us email at startupfeedback@carabinermedia.com. We hope you share this podcast with your friends and colleagues and also rate us in your favorite podcast platform. See you next time.